I guess almost 5 minutes past the start time, so we can kick off. Brian, did you want to do the kickoff? Do you want me to?
You can take it from here. I feel, you know, I got baby brain right now, so I don't.
Oh, yeah, okay.
No
All
one
right.
needs,
Well,
no one needs to hear me talk.
I appreciate the trust. I'm hoping not to mess it up too much here. So thank you everyone for joining. This is really exciting. We have Ken and we have Conrad from TakeTurns, and I saw their product just a few weeks ago, and I was pretty impressed with the simplicity and the actual value add that it can introduce into our day-to-day operations. And I wanted to bring it to this group and share it with everyone. So I'll hand it over to Ken and or Conrad. I don't know whoever's next here.
Yeah, thanks. So while I kind of chat, I'm going to start sharing my screen because whenever I do presentations, that's usually the thing I forget. So my name's Ken Brown, as Doe said, and I'm responsible for the sales team at TakeTurns. And joining me is Conrad Drung. Conrad is our Chief Marketing Officer. And today I'm enlisting his help to do the demo. Can you see my slides or my slide?
We can.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So this is not going to be death by PowerPoint, I promise. We're just going to go through a couple of them and kind of set the stage for the problem we're solving. And then rather than tell you about, I'm not going to get into how we do that. I'm going to save that for Conrad and let him get into that by actually showing you the product. So a little bit about TakeTurns. TakeTurns was founded by a group of folks. In fact, everybody at TakeTurns came from a past company where we all worked together. And it was in the enterprise software space. And as such, we dealt with lots of contracts and lots of negotiations, at least as stakeholders to that, not as ourselves legal people. But we saw the kinds of problems because we did all that through email. And saw the kinds of problems that are reflected on this slide. My favorite is when I would reply to something that I was blind copied on, not realizing that I was blind copied, and completely embarrassing myself. But you've probably experienced a lot of the problems with email, such as whose turn is it to work? Who has the pen, I guess, as we always like to say during contract negotiation. Is this the final document, or how is version control handled? And email can do the job. It just makes it a very manual process as far as structuring what that negotiation ought to look like. Because, and as we'll talk about, email is about the only tool we have at our disposal for external collaborations, which effectively a contract negotiation is. So while we're not really intending to replace email, we are intending to use a tool that is contextually aware of what's going on, such as a structured negotiation between two typically unrelated parties other than related through a business transaction. So the things that are the challenges that email presents, I mentioned one already, it being unstructured. As far as all of the processes of a negotiation, you have to manage manually in an email type of scenario. You have to, as a negotiation ebbs and flows with activity levels, you have to retrace multiple email threads in order to determine where things stand, and it just becomes kind of a cumbersome scenario. It's not secure insofar as our email servers are secure, but once you send an email, what happens to that email is completely beyond our control. So whether it's inappropriately or accidentally forwarding something to the wrong person, like email now has type ahead, so you type in C for Conrad and it goes off to Claire or something at a completely different company because you thought you had it right and it just wasn't. But then also the opaqueness of it, and that is the idea of being able to find the current status or the current state of a negotiation in a simple sort of fashion. So we'll get to see that in the demo how we address that. But I mean, the reason that's come about is pretty easy. Collaboration within an organization is pretty easy. We all have the same infrastructure. We have same operating procedures. We have the water cooler and the coffee pot. So collaboration internally happens easy. It's not really a problem. But when those things diverge across multiple companies, email is really the only way to bridge that gap. This is kind of almost a silly slide. We smooth it out. We'll get a look at how we do that. It's easy enough to say we do it, but we'll show you. Just to set a context for where we're going to sit in the legal process. Most organizations have their own variations of the dark blue and light blue line, but TakeTurns really is the yellow bubble that sits in between the organizations, and we'll get a look at that. One last slide, and I'm not gonna go through all of these, but at its heart, TakeTurns is not a negotiation tool. It's an external collaboration tool, of which contract negotiation is a good example. But there's lots of different use cases that it can be used for. That company that we all came from, I mentioned, that actually we went through an acquisition. And so we got introduced to the whole M&A process and due diligence and document gathering and things like that. So even document collection or data rooms, there are other point solutions that do pieces of what TakeTurns does, but it tends to be missing something. Whether it's the ability to actually collaborate, whether it's the ability to track versions of documents, whether it's the ability to just collect those documents, TakeTurns fills all of those gaps. Even to the point of, we saw that slide with the spaghetti in the middle, even to the point of it doesn't matter what your standard operating procedures are on either end of a negotiation, whether you use Google Docs or whether you use Microsoft Word, we're still going to track and do version control of those documents that are actually shared. Now, you might have a dozen versions of it on one side of the equation where you're going through your approval processes and edits and things like that. But the versions we're going to track are the versions that are actually shared across the boundaries. So any questions before I turn this over to Conrad? I will mention, I guess, Doe, I'll send these to you. I'm happy to share these. So you'll all get a copy of this, which there is. I'll just kind of cruise through here real quick. There is a lot of information as far as how we do this contained in this deck that Conrad's going to be actually showing in the demo. So I didn't want to go through all that. Okay, thanks, Doe. Conrad, I will turn it over to you.
All right. And so let's see if I can share my entire screen. Because I think I need both. Okay, do you see my screen? Ken, do you see anything or? Okay, hold on a second. Okay, good. Yeah. Good. All right, so I'm actually logged into TakeTurns. What you're seeing is like a list of all my active collaborations. So what we'll do is I'll just kind of show you a little bit of things that I've done with it because we ourselves use it. So if you look here, what this is actually a shortened list of the vendors that we spoke to when we were looking at SOC 2 software, so SOC 2 Type 2. We're in the process of getting that auditing done now. And you can actually see just kind of at a glance, like who we were working with, where we left off in terms of the actual collaboration. And then when you dig into a collaboration, you can see the entire thing tip to tail. So on the right-hand side, there's contextual chat. So it's like chat that I had with the sales reps and the people on their team to ask questions about the actual product. There is what we call a recap, which kind of lays out the whole thing tip to tail, turn by turn, and you actually see what we exchanged. So like, it's going to sound dumb, but one of the things I often struggle with is, I'll have a vendor form, like an order form pop up early in the conversation, and then we negotiate, and then another order form is in the email thread. And at some point, the email thread's gotten really long, so I often will pull the wrong order form again, or I'll look at the wrong order and be like, wait, I thought we negotiated this out. Anyways, so what this is kind of showing you is that time-based view of the entire discussion with us going back and forth, and you keeping all the files and the comments in context. And if you look at the little bubbles here, these are actually various people who were participating in the conversation, and they have different roles, right? So I was acting as procurement guy, so I was controlling the flow of information back and forth. But then we had some other people on the team who were evaluating the software package, but they could also contribute and they could also enter as if they wanted to. And then in this case, Fred appears as a ghost. Now, for one of the roles we have is this idea that you can add people to the collaboration who should be there to monitor what's happening, but won't be participating in any meaningful way. So they won't be contributing to documents, they won't be ending turns, they won't be sending messages. It's kind of like a super BCC, right? So they can see, but they can't touch. It's almost like they're a ghost. They can't touch anything. Although we like to think of them as friendly ghosts. And at the end of all this, what happens is you can archive it, and the archive contains all this information and then all the various files that were exchanged throughout the collaboration. And then that package is what we would recommend that you put into retention. And then this entire thing gets wiped off of our servers at some point. So that's kind of a really simple example of a collaboration kind of in context. The other thing you can do with TakeTurns is not just share files and trade versions, but you can also make requests. So if you look at, and these guys were another vendor we looked at, but if you look at this particular, the way that this particular collaboration went through, I made a request here for background information, and then the salesperson responded. And you can also see that in the recap. So from our point of view, a lot of times when you do these discussions, there's the files that you're working on or the documents you're working on, but then there's other things that kind of get drawn into the mix. So it's not just I'm sharing documents with this person or sharing a document. It's like I've got the contract, I've got the privacy policy, I've got all the appendixes, and I've got all the exhibits. And then now somebody needs a copy of the insurance. There's now somebody needs a copy of our certificate of incorporation. So we actually have both the way to, you can share the file and you can also make these requests here. So you can see the request and you can see that the request was fulfilled. So you can actually track it on here as well to see whether or not the things you asked for are actually things that you got. So that's kind of what we're doing with the basic collaboration, and that's what it looks like when it's going on and it's in action. Do you guys have any questions before I move on? I wanted to show you kind of just setting one up. And Ken, is there anything I missed? We're going.
I don't think so. Probably not. That won't come up as you go through setting one up.
Yeah, sure. So do you guys have any questions about the collaboration? We go ahead.
I have one very basic question.
Sure.
And I might have missed this, so I apologize.
Okay.
But, there's this I mean, does everything, I guess my question is, does everything have to happen on platform? Is there syncing with email? Yeah, is there, I guess my biggest concern either being both in-house at certain times or, outside, is getting the other party to agree to even use the other, use this stuff, right? So curious, yeah, to what extent can, because it seems like it's a really good way to track existing or track ongoing conversations and the progress and have that audit trail.
Right.
But I think I'd be curious to what extent.
So right now, the way it's currently designed is everything is actually on the platform. So in order for all this to work, the other party does have to essentially enter the platform, enter the portal. You can look at it that way. We don't require that they sign up, though. There's actually an email verification process similar to two-factor authentication that they can use to pop in and out. So it's not like they have to sign up, and it's not like they have to pay either. So something that's worth noting is that the only people that pay are the people that create collaborations. All participants are free, at least for the time being. Not that it's going to change anytime soon, but it's something that we thought a lot about because some of the platforms that we've seen, participants, sometimes you have to pay for them. So we didn't really want to do that. So we made it such that the person that creates it does. Now, you do get emails from the system which are akin to notifications, like you might get on Slack or in Teams, where basically you get a notification saying you missed a bunch of messages, or somebody has tagged you in a conversation. Yeah. It's similar to that. And the messages really tell you about whether or not somebody's made a contribution, or if you have missed chat messages, or if there's a request that's come towards you. But in terms of, say, recording or logging all the emails that you're currently exchanging with other parties, I think the goal is really to move it off of email and move it into a platform, into this platform. That's really what it is. So there is a little bit of a, I think there are some challenges with adoption from that perspective. But go on. Sorry.
That makes sense. I think, yeah, it makes total sense. I think reducing the friction of, having to convince another party. I imagine some parties are easy, they'll jump on, and then some parties are like, oh, it's not part of our process. We're going to go through email. And yeah, I think a lot about like customer service tools or like Zendesk. You can send something from the system and the other person can reply via email, but it still tracks it and records it on your end, so you feel like you're staying on platform, whereas the other party can be off platform.
Yeah,
and
it's in our roadmap.
Yeah,
it's I mean, I think one of the things that we figured we should start with is this first, and then look at extensions and integration second. So it's kind of like where we are in the process. Cool. But yeah, I'll write that down. I mean, so with things like, I mean, we do definitely see situations where people, I would say, depending on the power dynamic of the situation, like, so if you guys are buying and somebody else is selling, oftentimes the seller would just acquiesce and use whatever you guys are telling them to use. So procurement type use cases tend to be heavily slanted towards procurement. So you can, because, whether it's this Ariba or Workday or something, we're always having to sign up for somebody else's procurement tool. So, what's one more tool? But I can see if it's a bilateral negotiation, or if you have like a real counterparty on their side, there might be some pushback. The other part about it, though, that, we thought about was the fact that the whole goal was to remove a lot of this information from email, because people tend to keep tons and tons of stuff in email, which is a security issue. So it's one of the things we thought about. Anyways, any other questions or? Okay. So what you're looking at here is kind of starting a collaboration. So what I have here on the left-hand side is Ken. I've added Ken to the list, the Ken Brown Company. It's about a non-disclosure agreement. I've added the NDA. Now I can drag and drop files onto here. I can create a folder if I want to. I can put a request on here, like, request for the insurance or the certificate of incorporation. And then over here on my side, I can add multiple people. I've just added myself. And then you kind of start by sending a note, right? It's kind of like sending an email. So there's some rich text fields here, so you can include colors and bullets and checklists. I've received a lot of checklists from lawyers in the past. And then you hit send. And what this will do is it will send or create a new collaboration for Ken and I. And if I double click and take a look at it, you can see the participants here. We can both add participants to our teams. So if Ken is going to go on vacation, he could add somebody who's going to be his backup to be part of this. And I don't know if you saw it, but originally there was like a pending thing here, and it basically moved Ken up into this area. So you can see that Ken is now part of the actual collaboration. So I can add folks. There are the different types of folks. Like I said before, there's leaders who control the flow of information. Ghosts are people who can monitor, but like the super BCC folks. Followers are just following the collaboration, but they can be seen. And then collaborators are people who are going to edit or maybe put documents into here, make requests. They can chat, but they're not going to have any ability to do anything else like end turns. So that's who we have here for the participants. Ken is probably in the process of like putting out his red lines. I'm here. I can take a look at the document I sent. It's pretty simple. It's a single page. And what we'll see when Ken sends the document over, you'll actually see both documents stacked on top of each other. It's how we're managing the versions. The button here is called recall. That is an actual, okay, so Ken's done. That is an actual recall. So what recall means is that I'm going to suspend the other person's turn and pull it back. So it's useful for situations if somebody forgot to add files or if somebody put the wrong files in there. It's something to essentially cut their access off to your documents. So it's more like what Recall in Outlook should be, as opposed to a notification telling you someone actually put the wrong files in. So you can see that it's advanced to third turn. Go on.
Quick, is he editing within
No,
TakeTurns, or he's
yeah.
editing in Word and then
He's editing in
uploading it here?
Word or Google Docs or whatever he
Yeah.
wants.
Okay.
One thing that we thought a lot about was whether or not we should build a document editing solution. It's still up in the air, but or basically partner to get one. It doesn't sound like a lot of lawyers want to do that, but it seems like it's a mix. There's some people who like it, some people who don't. But what you're seeing here is you're seeing the fruits of his labor having gone through the editing in Word. So the idea is you've got your own tools, you have your own internal CLM system that you're logging this stuff into, or own matter management system you're using. That's where that stuff is, and what you're actually popping out of it is the version you're going to send me, which has all of the red lines. But a lot of companies in the doc editor graveyard. Oh,
I
what is that?
I just figured I would add that, like, I can name probably a list of 20 companies that were like, we're gonna change the way, you know, people Microsoft Word's old and we're gonna disrupt Microsoft Word. Failed.
Yes.
It's just an impossible feat. So I think, yeah, I mean,
It's an impossible feat. And, you know, not to be unkind to Google Docs, it doesn't do a very good job with certain things that Microsoft figured out, like, seriously 20 years ago. So I don't really see a lot of reason to invest in that. So to your point, I think from a convenience perspective, being able to quickly do a couple of things in here. So we are, one of the things that we're thinking about, which we're working on, is the ability to say, you know, add flags or stamps on here, that kind of thing, or, you know, but for the most part, what you're seeing here is you're seeing the different versions. You're seeing the initial version that I sent. You're seeing Ken's companies or Ken's version. There's additional things I can do. If I agree, I can overlay my version. I can remove the file. I can lock the file. I can ask him to review. So there's a couple other things I can do here, but that's pretty much, this goes back and forth, kind of as you would imagine. And that's how TakeTurns works, really. At the end, you basically click this wrap up button, and then that's where it compresses everything to an archive, which both parties can download, and then it wipes it from the system after you're done. The one thing I will say here, is this skip turn bit. Oh, there's Ken. Maybe Ken can ask me questions. You can ask me some questions, Ken. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Can I ask a question, since
Yeah.
you're going through this? At the end of this, is there a capability to sign documents, or you have to wrap it up, like you said, and then put it in a file and then?
It depends on your process. So some organizations would just take the final copies, which you can just download all the files, or download the final copies from this turn. And then they'll build the envelope in DocuSign and send that off, and they'll just be done. Some companies do that. Some folks are actually bringing back the signed copies in here and then saving it, wrapping it up after that point. So it depends on what you want to do. There have been a couple instances where I've seen people just like, we talked to folks, they just do they're not actually using a document signing solution. They're using more of a, not digital signature, they're using electronic signature. So they just paste a signature in there and they send it to the other person accepts, and then they're done. So it's more of a doc edit. It's not really a DocuSign thing. It is on our roadmap though. So e-signature is something that quite a few people have asked about. And so we have that. I'm not entirely sure where that is though. But does that answer your question?
Yes. Thank you.
I mean, when you talk about like the ability to drop out into something like e-signature, I do have a question. Would you be looking for something that's much more, say, end-to-end, where you can almost click a button over here and they would just go ahead and create the envelope, load the documents for you, that kind of thing. I mean, the one challenge that I think we would run into is, or something that we've seen is, some documents require signature order. So a lot of that's done in the e-signature tool itself. It's not done, it wouldn't be done outside. Or you're looking for something more like you just go and pull in the doc or something after it's done, or you could put in the envelope ID or something like that.
I mean, it's just for the ease of the workflow, right? At
Okay,
the end
yeah.
of the day, people are only interested in the signature copy. And I mean, for me, we want to control that. So if we have
Okay.
like some kind of connection to DocuSign, I've seen CRMs that does that.
Yeah, okay, very good. I wrote that down. So Ken, oh, is there anything else you wanted to add about Take Turns, or?
No, not at all. I just wanted to send a chat. You're good.
Yeah, it's it doesn't. I would say that that's pretty much all we're doing, which is really focused on that external collaboration portion of this, as opposed to focusing on the internal collaboration part, or and so it's slowly going in that direction. The other thing that we do have, I should mention, is you can copy links from here, which you can paste into, or you can store in internal Teams discussions or Slack discussions, or things like Salesforce. Sometimes, put in Salesforce notes or whatever. The people that are party to this can follow the link and see the collaboration, but nobody else can. And then the other thing too, that I don't know if this is the right user. I might be the right user. Yeah, so we also have organizational management as well. I'm not an administrator of my organization, so I can't see who else has licenses. But if you are the organizer, if you are the administrator, you not only see your org ID, but you also see all the people below. And we do have a feature where you can assign a supervisor to the individual, and that individual who is supervising does have entitlements to view collaborations that the individual is participating in. So that's another thing we've built into the system. So there's a little bit of like a hierarchy management type, or I would say authority type management in this tool. And that's Take Turns in a nutshell. I mean, I can invite someone to a collaboration if you guys are curious, see how it works firsthand.
But regarding that, there is, if you were to go to TakeTurns.com and sign up for a trial, we don't ask you for a credit card and all that kind of stuff to try it out.
Sure.
So.
Yeah.
I have a quick question on your ICP. Who's using Take Turns the most, and where you see it being the most successful? I used to work in-house as a lawyer for 10 years, and now I'm doing outside practice. I have some clients who I very much feel like, I'm their fractional general counsel, so I'm very involved in certain circumstances. I have like an email with them. In others, I'm really kind of an outside resource. I think, a tool like this could be really helpful if they're doing a lot of deals, and it gives me kind of a bird's eye view and more control over the flow of the deal. But it would seem kind of weird for me to say, hey, let's jump on, even in the case where I'm fractional general counsel, but and I feel embedded, but I'm truly not an employee of the company. It would feel strange for me to say, hey, let's use this software moving forward. Do you have law firms who use this? Do you have outside lawyers who use this, or is this mostly an in-house tool for in-house legal departments?
Well, Ken, do you want to answer? Or?
Yeah, well, I can start on it. We, ironically enough, we do have a couple of law firms. The ironic part of that is they don't use it for negotiations; they use it for procurement. So that's just the irony part. The sweet spot from a legal perspective is in-house counsel. But the weirdness part that I would I guess, explore a little bit is it's probably no more weird than using something like a Dropbox or something for document collection around due diligence or something to that effect, or it's the same sort of SaaS thing, but it would tend to be more in-house counsel, even if it's fractional, versus yeah, divorce family law attorneys or litigation attorneys probably wouldn't use this in those circumstances.
Yeah, and then looking a little bit, taking a step back and looking at it more like across industry, we also see uptake in things like freelancers, consultants for managing some of the work, also in a little bit in compliance, and then some in marketing, people working on marketing projects, and then sales and pre-sales. Specifically on like dealing with things like documents that are exchanged in the pre-sales process. But that's a little bit outside of what we're looking at.
Mhm.
But I think that when I think about the ideal customer profile, it's going to be generally folks that are dealing with kind of other counterparties, other external parties, and that need something to manage that, and not just one, but multiple. I mean, so you can see with procurement, it makes sense, dealing with a lot of vendors, vendor onboarding, RFPs, RFXs. Same thing with sales, those kinds of things where you see a lot of people. And then also with legal stuff, if you're dealing with a lot of negotiations, or you're dealing with a lot of documents that have to be reviewed or matters, that kind of thing, that you're examining things. So I think it all depends, really. It all depends. And I think to echo Ken's comments, yeah, I think it's one of these things where it's early. So that's why people feel like it's a little strange. I think it felt very strange to use Dropbox when it first came out,
Yeah.
but I think a lot of people are now completely okay with it.
Mhm.
I just remember early on using it and being kind of weirded out because it was like folks were using Dropbox with personal email addresses to move company confidential documents. Which is something I probably shouldn't admit, but I think the statute of limitations is well past. So.
Yeah. No, I think, I mean, you're right. It's one of these things that it takes a long time, both for like the network effect to take control if you truly do get penetration, and just for people to get used to something like this. And I see the value in in a more complex deal that has a lot of documents and a lot of history. This becomes super valuable because it's better than an email thread, and you can go back to it and quickly view kind of the history of the thing and what documents were collected when. And so, I like it for that. And I also think, like, as an outside lawyer, even if a company had a big deal to do, and I shepherded them through that and kind of gave them access to this report, I think it could be a value add. But yeah, I mean, I think it's the path of least resistance oftentimes that wins.
Yeah.
And so that, I guess, would be my biggest challenge in using it, and your biggest challenge, I guess, in selling it to folks who are on the outside in. But yeah, I mean, I see the value, I guess, in especially in the more complex deals.
I think one of the bits of advice that came from one of the lawyers we're working with is that we should market this more like pharmaceuticals. And I was like, excuse me? And he said, well, ask your lawyer about TakeTurns because it's more confidential. He said, don't market to me, because a lot of times I have to do what the client tells me to do. He said, and I have some clients, he said, probably like you, he said, I have some clients where I can definitely tell them what I want them to do because they're a little bit less smaller customers, smaller than me, and, all those kinds of things. But he said, yeah, sometimes if the clients were asking for it, we would just do it immediately. So it's like if you market to them and like try to play into some of what they're concerned about. That's kind of how we ended up on the in-house counsel side, actually.
Got it. Cool.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Ken, do you want to take control back again, or?
Yeah, I don't need the screen, but
Okay.
happy to take on any of your questions, and then we'll, if there are none, we can turn it back to Doe or Brian.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Joe, you want to take it? I think, I mean, it's been great. I appreciate you guys coming on and showing this. And it's a unique tool that I haven't seen much like before. So I appreciate you coming on and giving us the time. It sounds like we probably could wrap it up, but Joe, I don't know if you have anything left.
No, just only thank you for your time and for doing the demo again. It was just as good as the first time, Ken. And we have the recording. We will make the recording available to HeyCounsel members in the future. And so we'll be in touch if there's any additional questions that come up after this demo. And we're happy to share any presentation or PowerPoint. Ken, if you send that over, I can put that out to the group as well.
Will do. We'll get it to you.
Great.
Right. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Have a good day.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.